All right, everyone. All right, everyone. Excuse me for 1 second, please. Thank you. Welcome to the Frontline Club. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Lyse is already here. Please, just a reminder to turn your phone off. And these are Chatham House rules, so you can talk about details and maybe have a clip or two, but try not to record the whole event. And we're expecting the room to be very full tonight, so if you could do us a favor and squeeze in and make sure the seats on the side are available in case of any late stragglers, that would be a massive help. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you all for coming tonight. I am very honoured to be here chairing this event with two absolutely dear friends of mine, Saad Massini and Lyse Doucet, and also to have Mahfouz, who I just met. We will be talking about a country that we all love very much, I think. So, first of all, I'm sure she doesn't need any introduction, but fabulous Lyse Doucet, doyen of the BBC, you recently described in my newspaper as a national treasure who actually isn't British, but and also that rare thing, which is a star reporter without an oversized ego. And now, a writer, an author of a wonderful book. If you haven't read it, please buy it, read it. It is an amazing book. And she's also very kind, I can say personally. So, delight to be chairing her and talking about her new book. Also next to me, Saad Massini, who many of you may know, Afghanistan's first media mogul, sometimes described as the Rupert Murdoch of Afghanistan. I'm not sure if he likes that. Founder of Afghanistan's first commercial TV station, Tolo TV, and who has somehow, against all expectations, including, I think, your own, managed to keep broadcasting since the Taliban have taken over, which we will talk about. And he too has written a wonderful book which should have been here but isn't, called Radio Free Afghanistan, about how he did it. So we'll be talking about those, and I'm delighted to also be joined by Mahfouz Zubeidi, who has literally just flown in from Afghanistan and is a senior producer for the BBC, and hopefully will be telling us all about what is happening at the moment. It's also great to see so many familiar faces in the audience. I think there's a lot of expertise here on that side, so I hope when we have the questions and answers there will be a lot of exchange. You might have seen that this event is called Reporting Afghanistan, when the reality is it's actually not very easy to report Afghanistan at the moment. Some of us can't get visas to go there, being Western women. And many Afghan reporters have had to flee, and those there are working under very difficult circumstances. So it's not reporting quite as we might like it to be. As you know, it's 4 years, more than 4 years, since Taliban's shock takeover, and the situation is grim. The UN's outgoing envoy just this week described it as a perfect storm of overlapping crises. And we all know about the endless restrictions on women and girls, which many people have described as gender apartheid. But most recently, we've seen reports from the earthquake of women not getting rescued from the rubble because there are no women aid workers allowed to go there, and the men are not allowed to help women who they're not related to. And it's as if things were not hard enough. There's widespread drought. Millions of Afghans have been forced to return from Afghanistan and Pakistan this year. And the UNICEF just said last week that there is an unprecedented spike in malnutrition. So it's all pretty grim, and we will get into all of this. But I think first of all, we'll start talking about books. Books, obviously, a very different kind of storytelling to reporting, far more immersive. And Lyse, before we get into your book, I just thought, we all know that you love Afghanistan, and you've spent many years reporting from that. But probably most people don't know why you went to Afghanistan in the first place. So maybe if you could just tell us that.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Christina and Saad and Mahfouz. It's a great honor to be here on this new stage. You see how lovely this new stage is, and we're among the first people to be on this new stage. And also that you've all come out in such large numbers. When I knew that my book was published, and we talked about having an event to bring together Afghan friends and friends of Afghanistan. And of course, there could be no other place to do it except the Frontline Club, because when I first went to Afghanistan and Pakistan in 1988-89, this was when Vaughan Smith was there and Peter Juvenile, and they were going in and out from 100 Canal Bank Road. I think there's the street sign is still downstairs. And so a lot of us trace our origins, our first memories of Afghanistan, to the people who founded the Frontline Club, which, as you know, is still now a gathering place here in London. And we like to say as a home fighting for independent journalism. But I thought, because this is a place where friends gather, I was a little bit too shy just to have this about my book launch. Although Venetia's here and she goes, Lyse, you have to, from Penguin, you have to have a book launch, And I said, well, just bring my friends along. And of course, I couldn't have written the book without my dear friend and colleague of 25 years, Mahfouz Zubaydi. In many ways, it is Mahfouz's book as well. He wasn't just my translator and interpreter. He helped me to try to understand as best as possible the emotions and experiences of what it's like to live in war, and to go through the turbulent history that Afghanistan has had to endure. And I think most of the people here know it so well. Saad, of course, being Afghan, Christina, who also started to report on Afghanistan.
We should say we met right at the beginning in 1988 in Pakistan and then Afghanistan.
As one did. My book begins my book begins in 1988.
Lyse, you're not answering the question.
Oh, yes.
So if you were,
which is why did I go to Afghanistan?
Then we get on to the book.
Once upon a time, not so long ago, in fact, a very long time ago. Well, it's a very long story, but I will just summarize it in this rather weird way, which is I first started to work for the BBC in West Africa, where I just had, some people call it right place, right time. But right now we're supposed to say, well, actually, I made my own right place, right time. But I found myself in Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa after I graduated from university in Canada. And when I went to the big city after working as a volunteer teacher, there I was in Abidjan, and the BBC was setting up its first West Africa office. And there I was, wrong accent, wrong CV, in fact, if truth be told, no CV, wrong country. And then the clouds opened and angels came down from the sky and said, give Lyse Doucet a job. And I worked there for 5 years, came to London on a work permit. And then for some reason I had a friend who'd worked with my sister as a water engineer, and said, oh, you must go to Pakistan. Your karma's in Pakistan. I said, oh, okay, maybe. And Pakistan looked so interesting because I became interested in religion and politics when I lived in West Africa. And Gordon Adam is here. He may not remember. I went around to the BBC Pashto service, to the BBC Urdu service, to the BBC Persian service. And I said, I'm going to Pakistan and I'm happy to do some reporting for you. I said, thank you, Lyse, thank you. Thank you, Lyse. No, we don't need anything. No. Nobody wanted anything. But it was in my karma. What could I do? So I went out there and I went to Quetta. And I think we met in Quetta. We met in Quetta. And I went to Quetta. Nobody went to Quetta, except very interesting people lived in Quetta, including someone named Hamid Karzai, and a number of people who later became very important people in Afghanistan. So I started sending, probably to Gordon and other people, these dispatches from Quetta, and goes, oh, Lisa's reporting from Quetta. Oh, that's so interesting. Wow, we never thought about Quetta. And then when I used to meet Chris, then I went to Islamabad, and it was the end of martial law. Benazir Bhutto came. It was an extraordinary time for reporting. And again, to make a long story short, the Pakistan job came up, but I was too junior, and someone else got the job, and the first thing he said was, get her out. I don't want Lyse Doucet here. And it was Benon Savan, the UN envoy, who spoke to people in Kabul, so his people spoke to their people, and the BBC was not getting any visas, so there it was. I found myself going to Afghanistan. I got a rare visa. And I'd already, if truth be told, been fallen in love with Afghanistan. I still remember my first time meeting Afghan women in the refugee camps around Quetta, and just being really struck by their sense of self, their character, their sense of humor. I remember Afghans talking about kite flying in Kabul, and one man who was an aid worker saying, and in fact, you know, Afghans developed kites. And being, you know, oh, really? That's so amazing that Afghans developed kites. So I was already taken by the story. So in the best traditions of competitive journalism, I was forced out of Pakistan, went to Afghanistan, and found myself with the greatest and the biggest story of the world, because it was that was the, you know, not just the harshest winter in a decade, but it was also the height of the Cold War, and Soviet troops are being pulled out of Afghanistan.
It was also very.
Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did.
Too long, but you can edit it.
So both of us went because of Benon Seven, who was the UN envoy, and he actually did something rather interesting, which was
to help you get a visa too.
To say that to the Russians, why, you know, all these people. So I was reporting, I'm not sure if you were doing that or not, but I was going in and out with the Mujahideen a lot, and he said to them, why don't you let these people who have reported the war from the other side see it from your side, which is quite unusual. I mean, would that we could do that in Ukraine and Russia or Gaza and many places. So anyway, so he arranged, when we went, I went to the Kabul hotel, which was the kind of dodgy place, which had a very notorious telex operator. Probably most people here don't even remember telexes.
Teletype machine. Who remembers the teletype machine with the ticker tape? Yeah, it was Anna Williams. There you go. That's Chris.
And they had a one-armed telex operator, but he was also the driver, which was quite scary. But he was driving. So I went there, and you went to the Intercon, which was the finest hotel.
Yes, sort of. Yes. And, there wasn't many alternatives.
Those of you here who know Kabul will know the Intercom, because it's almost like a sort of castle on a hill in Kabul. So tell us why you decided to write a book about the hotel.
Okay. I think I was starting to answer that, but anyway. Again, I will make a very long story short, and I think maybe it's of interest to us because there's a lot of people in the audience who do tell stories, either as journalists or authors, and I should emphasize that even though I'm so excited I've become an author, Christina has written 10 books, and Saad has written 1 book. And my book is Mahfouz's book, so you've written one too. But I will just go back because you know, storytelling is all, as Margaret Atwood likes to say, you have to have a storyteller, but you also have someone to listen to your stories, because it can't really be a story unless someone hears it and hopefully captivated by it. And I still remember, I was a graduate student in Toronto, and it was a grey, drizzly Saturday morning, and I was in a cafe on Queen Street. Leslie's over there thinking, oh, Queen Street. And I was reading Truman Capote's book, In Cold Blood. And you know, sometimes when you read a book and you're awed by it, and you just sit there and you absorb the enormity of this book you just read. And I was blown away by this idea that you could use the conventions of literature, of fiction, to write a true story, of nonfiction. And I thought, wow, I was dazzled by it. It was Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. Some of you may remember that, true crime, although some people said later he invented a bit, but we'll leave that for the side. And then when I started traveling, I don't know what your own experience, I'd always turn to novels or what we call narrative history, where to try to get a better understanding of a people and a place, the kind of writing where history lives on the page and the characters come to life. In the US, it was called New Journalism, Tom Wolfe and Joan Didion, not that I'm putting myself in their category, but it's a certain genre of writing. Even I went to the Hay Festival and Salman Rushdie was talking about how he was trying to look at that kind of writing. So I thought about, well, when I started writing it, it was strange that as the words tumbled onto my computer and formed sentences, formed stories, I found I was writing it in that way. And I think it was because it was also the time that all of us who are journalists were very aware of what's called news avoidance. That people are saying, oh, the news is so grim, it's so depressing. And of course, news just gives you a snapshot of people who live in war. It's people running away from the bombs and bullets, people wailing in the hospital, people standing in the rubble of their home. All of that and more happens in Afghanistan. But for those of us who spend time, and there's many here in this audience, people have to get up every day and face the day with an everyday kind of courage, and to hopefully try to have some measure of hope, and if you're Afghan, of course, humor, and to get through the day. And I thought if I try to write it in a way, drawing on some of the conventions of literature, to tell stories that can draw people more into Afghanistan, that maybe I'll get hopefully I'll tell a good story, and a story that resonates with people. But I needed what they say in literature is conceit, a prism. And I thought about doing it first from a palace, Qasr Yak, which is where I met many of the presidents and their families. But then I thought because I went there with Najibullah, met his family, Hamid Karzai. But then I went to visit Ashraf Ghani and his wife, and they said, we'll meet you in palace number 4. And I said, no, it's got to be palace number 1, But so I thought, darn, there's not enough in palace number 1. But it would have been a great title for a book, Palace Number 1. And I thought, well, why don't I start with my first Afghan home? And I consulted Shoaib Sharafi. I don't think Shoaib's here tonight, where I worked with a lot. And I said, do you think that's a good prism, and he said, yeah. And so then I started going back and met the people again who I'd known since I lived in the hotel for nearly a year in 88, 89, and kept meeting as I went back. And then I started looking at the history. And so that became my prison. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a luxury hotel?
And of course, when it opened, it was the luxury hotel. We should maybe make clear to people it's no longer, hasn't been for many years, part of the Intercontinental Group.
Yes, but I was started thinking that if someone said, Lyse, the hotel is on booking.com. And I'm really worried that people who come to the book festivals, they're all going to be, Lyse is talking about this hotel. I'm going to go to the Intercontinental in Kabul, and they're going to meet the Taliban running it looks like a 5-star hotel on social media. Yeah.
Maybe, Saad, actually, you could tell us a little bit about the hotel to you.
The hotel, is this working? Hello, can you hear me? So we actually lived...
Is it working? No, it's not on.
It's on. Mario? Use this. We actually lived down below. Do you remember those buildings down below, Lyse? Built for the civil servants, Quartier Montmarine.
Yeah.
So we lived down below, and my father was a pretty serious old school father, and he always insisted on going for walks, as a typical Kabuli would. And then he would drag myself and my brother up to the hill, and we would alternate between Bogabolo, which was the King Amanullah's castle, of sorts.
For his mistresses, yes.
And Intercontinental. And we'd do a loop and would come back. And my brother, who was quite lazy and chubby at the time, would always insist, why can't we go for a walk in the car, right? But they had weddings, they had performances by the pool. And I remember Ahmad Zahir once performing by the swimming pool. And Ahmad Zahir is a very famous
the
Afghan
the Elvis of Afghanistan.
The Elvis of the region, actually. So it was always a very special hotel, and I think it's probably in your book. I mean, it was the hotel of the year in like 1975. So it's a special place to a lot of us Afghans, and of course after the fall of the Taliban the first time, we did have a lot of performances. Afghan Star was shot there, filmed there. We had concerts by the pool. We hosted people. at the hotel. It was actually, well, we felt at the time it was secure because it's up on the hill. And of course, there was that very famous incident, which is in Lyse's book. So it's a great story. And through that hotel, I mean, we've all experienced so much of that country.
Yes, my editor, Rowan Bouchers, who works with Venetia, later confessed to me after I signed the book contract that he goes, oh, I didn't think there's going to be enough of the history in that hotel. But in fact, I was surprised at how much of the history actually went through the hotel, and how much it is. History lives in its walls, and the bullet holes that are still there, the marble you can see on the 5th floor. What's the legacy of the suicide bombings? You can see the holes in the restaurant on the floor. So the hotel is a character too.
One of the things I loved was the way you talked about them having to constantly replace the portrait of whoever was in charge. So first the royals, and then the Soviet-backed communists, and then the Mujahideen warlords, then the Islamists, and then I guess Karzai, and sort of attempts at Western kind of democracy, and then I don't know whose picture is there now.
Yes.
The Taliban are in charge of the hotel again.
No, the Taliban.
Yes.
They,
No pictures.
no pictures
No
for them, but
pictures.
it's white flag you can see there.
Yes.
And what, Mahfouz, tell us a little bit about what the hotel was to you growing up in Kabul.
Well, the hotel itself and the characters, which is in the book. The hotel itself is a history of Afghanistan. So when Lyse started, she said that she's want to write a book about this hotel, and I said, "What? It's just a hotel." I mean, you need words to write a book. But when we start talking to these people, these characters, they are really amazing people, and they live the history. Like Mahmoud Agha, there's one guy, and Hazrat, the way that he was describing that, we thought that it's his own house, that he know everything. Like even the padlocks, from 70s up to now. So it was the way that they were starting. They told us the story. I was so amazed, and I said one day to Lyse, said, I'm so lucky to be with you in this book, and of course, and then the Taliban came, and so some of those people are still working, but some of them have lost their jobs. But we asked them, several times. Lyse asked them, so they said it is our home. So we Afghans, I mean, it's Afghan traditional things that where you live or where you work. So both, they're saying it's both our house, and we care about the people who works there, and also the place itself. So yeah, it's the hotel. I mean, have been witness of a lot of war, like civil war, as you said, and it made history, and that the Lower Jirgas that we call it, all the important events was took place there.
Maybe, Lyse, you can tell us a bit about some of the characters in the hotel.
Yeah, but Mahfouz, we should have journalists. Does that work? No.
Take this. Hello.
This is like, it's such a great place to hold an event. Where's Mario? No, I've always, I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if Sargun, am I right that I always marvel at Afghan memories. Like Mahfouz and I would sit down and we'd spend hours with some of these characters, including Hazrat, who was like 70 years old and had been working at the hotel since he was his 20s. And we'd go away from the interview and we'd say to each other, we can't remember what we had for lunch yesterday. And they're remembering, like in detail, what went on in the hotel. And when I went to the hotel, it was this wonderful thing that I was reunited with some of the people who worked in the hotel when I was there in the 1980s, and then meeting new people who had started work after that. But what I loved about Hazrat is because he was what he had started when there was a real intercontinental, and he was still so proud that he knew how to run a 5-star hotel. In fact, every time the hotel changed hands, he would make it clear that he knew how to do things right. And of course, they would have Aga Sahib, they called him, the great master. But the first time we sat down for a talk, he actually made the gesture of flipping a towel, a white, plush, soft white towel, because he was remembering how the wealthy tourist used to glide across the marble floor, this air of ease and privilege, and they'd swan down to the swimming pool, and here was Hazrat. It was a totally different world, but he remembered the towels, like the details, how they actually felt. And so then we sat down to have a conversation, and I talk about this in the book. There's always, no matter who rules Afghanistan, there's always spooks lurking in the lobby. And so the intelligence guy was, what's she doing? Oh no, she's writing a book about the hotel. So they're a little bit suspicious. So I'm sitting down with Hazrat, and he's talking away. So the spy chief comes close, and then he brings up his chair, and he's listening in. And Hazrat keeps talking about Hazrat keeps talking about the towels. And the spy chief gets sort of bored, and he's thinking, why is he talking about the towels? So then he comes right in, and he butts in, and he says, all my security people are worried about the jinns, the evil spirits. I said, but you're in charge of security. He goes, yes, but there's jinns in the hotel. And so the sun is fading in the dusk, and so we look out the floor to ceiling windows, and he's sort of showing us, because people had died in the hotel, some part of the hotel is built on graves. So it was really funny that he really got into the spirit, but he also then helped me to understand. Then later the staff opened up about the jinns in the hotel, because it was really important for me as a non-Afghan, which is why it was so important to work with someone like Mahfouz. Like we'd go through when someone is trying to describe a traumatic situation and about their belief in God, and poor Mahfouz, I'd call him up for the zillionth time. Do you think that the way they say would be Shukur Huda, Luft Kunin, Fazli Huda, Allah Karim, Alhamdulillah, or what the, what would, and he would say Lyse. In that case, they would say Shukur Huda. And in another place, they would say, Zarguna's laughing because I called her a zillion times. So they wear the green, the white, the multicolored dress first at the wedding. Then they use the green dress. Then it's the white dress. Are you sure? And then I call her back. Are you sure? Do they always have to wear the white dress? So it was to get the details correct, because if I wrote a book and then later someone said, Lyse, you got it completely wrong. And so that was why it was really important that Mahfouz was there to be my guide in all things. But also in terms of talking about the jinns, is that the people who lived in this hotel had a very strong relationship with it, and I had to go beyond superficial. As Mahfouz, I would say to Mahfouz, they're saying that they feel this hotel is like their own home. Do we believe them? And he goes, yes, Lyse, they really do feel. But the fact that they saw spooks there, and the sort of the layer, the depth of their relationship to the hotel. And this Muhammad Aga, the waiter, then told us about he'd been chased by jinns, that he was woken up and the jinn had him by the neck, and there's all these kind of stories. But anyway.
It sounds like The Shining.
One of the details I really liked talking about the spooks was during this, I guess it must have been during the Soviet times, when the spooks were paying the bellboys to get the bins from the journalists' rooms and go through their rubbish, because they thought that journalists had actual real information that they didn't have, which was intriguing.
But I'll just conclude by saying that I've always been struck in Afghanistan, and Mahfouz and Saad can speak to this, is that they have actually lived through every political system that the world has known. They've had a peaceable kingdom, they've had Soviet-backed communism, they've had warlordism, which tore the Kabul apart. They had Islamism of the Taliban. They had a wannabe democracy bankrolled by the West. And now they have the Taliban again. And of course, with every period of history, mistakes are made on both sides. But it's true, isn't it, that the Afghans are survivors?
Well, the joke is that we've got the black thumb. We ruin every system, right? We ruined monarchy, the republic, and then the Mujahideen, the communists. I mean, every system we've adopted, it's failed.
Yes.
Don't you think it's true?
Yes. Which of the
After-
characters did you like the best, Mahfouz?
Well, all of them, but especially that Hazrat and the chef
Abida.
Abida.
I was
I
going to
mean,
ask you about
yeah.
that, the women.
Yeah, that
working
I
in the
mean,
hotel.
she is. There's one thing that just before talking about the characters, I just want to explain a little bit more about this Shukr Khuda Hala Karimas. That even if all those suicide attacks which used to happen in Afghanistan, and when someone lost their loved ones, but the good thing about Afghans is that if you go, so I'm sorry you lost. It's by the, it was God, with the grace of God. So I mean, you go to their homes, so they don't have food to eat, and you still see them happy, and they are sick. They don't have a place to live, but still, you see them with a smile, welcoming you. So that's the reality of Afghans. They always welcoming their guests. So that's what we say. We're very famous with the hospitalities, Afghans. So that's what our character used to do. So of course, when you're working somewhere, so they have their own rules and regulations, right? But every of them, like no matter a waiter or chef, they used to offer us food, which is you're not allowed to do that, right? In a restaurant, so you have to pay if you are inviting. But they were always insisting us to have food with them, cup of coffee,
And tell
tea.
us about Abda, the first female
Yeah.
chef, because she seemed a real character.
Abida.
Abida, yeah, Abida. When we met her first, it was in the lobby, and it was a coffee shop. She started actually as a chef in a Kabul hotel where we used to. So after the fall of the Taliban and Karzai, when he announced that everybody can go back to their work. So she was the first lady went to do we call it Hazri. Every government has a worksheet that you go and sign that you came and you left. So she started with again with Kabul hotel, and then she was jobless, and then in the bazaar, a local bazaar, so she met a friend, an old friend that he used to work with her in Kabul hotel, right? So he said, Abida, what are you doing? She said, well, I'm a jobless, so there's a job in Continental. Because working in a Continental is like itself, it was like, not close to a minister, but people were so proud because it was that famous, right? Seriously, that proud that, that, oh, I'm working in, like the way that we say, in Afghanistan, if people will come to us and say, Zaruna Jan knows this, I'm working for BBC. So like it's a very famous, right? So I'm working in Intercontinental. So it was a very famous hotel. So she started there, and she said, she has to give a test. And so the director general of that then was a foreigner. I think it was from South Africa. No, was well, a foreigner. That's what she said. And she said, are you guys cooking mantu? Ashak is very famous. I mean, people who have had, are you guys cooking this in this hotel? They said, no. She said, okay, I'm going to cook you guys mantu ashak and bulani, which is another Afghan dish. And she said they didn't have the dish, but she managed to cook that. And then the manager liked it, and they hired her. So she herself is illiterate, but all her children were educated, well educated. Sadly, one of her daughter was died. Was it cancer? Right? It was tumors. A few months ago, and I mean, at the moment, she herself is, struggling with diabetes and others. Thanks to Lyse, that she's supporting her with all medicines and treatments. But still, when I call her, I mean, Lyse is telling me that to call of them every a month or 2 weeks, 3 weeks to just ask about their health and how they're doing. She still have that smile, and she's my son. She calls me son. My son, I'm fine, and so everything is fine. So how's your health? It's okay. I'm getting as I said, you will never hear complaining Afghans about their health, even they are in worse situation, right, Sad? But they say Alhamdulillah,
Yeah.
so we're fine. You're not fine, so you're sick. So
I don't know if I agree with that.
So, Mahfouz, what we really want to know is what it was like working with Lyse.
No.
The inside story.
It's not the topic. It's not the topic. Stick with the topic.
It's a long history. No, allow me to talk to that.
No, this is too embarrassing. No.
Yeah.
We're friends. You know, you're going to say something.
I start working with Lyse. I mean, there's another colleague, Richard Reed, is here as well, so she knows the story as well. I was a shoe shiner on the street, and half a day I used to, because I was the breadwinner of my family. So I used to polish shoes on the street. It's a long history, but I'll just make it shorter. Is that one night, it was a very late night, and she came because she was one of my customers. So I was waiting for her because she was well paying us, so that's why. And she said, Mahfouz, what are you doing? Back then, I didn't speak in English, and her Farsi was good. I mean, good enough to communicate with us. I said, I haven't worked, and I have to buy bread for my family. There's food. She said, come in. It was, I remember still, it was November 2002. She said, I polished her shoes, and she gave me a lot of money. You know, it was enough to feed my family for a few months. And she said she's going back to London because it's their Christmas, and Christmas was new for me. I don't know what Christmas mean. New Year, and then she will come back, so she will give me a job at the BBC. So the history is, it's a lot to talk about. I mean, it takes hours.
It sounds like
But
you
she
should
kept-
be writing a book.
Yeah, and then she came back, so she gave me a job because I was at the age of that BBC was not. I mean, I didn't have any experience. I used to go to school, so she told the reporter that I want Mahfouz. He didn't know that I'm paying his salary. The BBC has health insurance, so in every August, so we have pay rise. So I was getting equal rights of salaries and everything through Lyse, but I didn't know that it's Lyse paying until when I got a contract, official contract from BBC, and my boss Paul Danhart said, "Oh, now you're working for BBC." And I was, "Well, I've been working for BBC for the last 2 years." He said, No. It was Lyse used to pay your salary, your insurance, and everything, but from now on, so this is a contract. So from now on, Lyse will not pay your salary, not your insurance, not nothing. It's BBC will pay you. So it's long, but I just want to make it short.
Okay.
So yeah.
So,
Well,
Let me just tell you the real story. I only opened the door. I said, Mahfouz, I'm leaving. It's up to you. You can come and work at the BBC, but I'm not going to be here. It is all up to you. So they got him to go and pick up the airline tickets. He learned how to book the airline tickets. They got him to pick up the newspapers. He learned how to read the newspapers. They told him to sort the money. He learned how to do the budgets. He taught himself how to do the camera. It was all up to him, so much so that after 2 years, as he mentioned, then they gave him a proper job. And I only emphasize that. I really did little. I just opened the door. And so when people say to me about the situation of Afghanistan, I say, that I was asked about it on Jeremy Vine today, that even the smallest of gestures, we can say, oh, what's that going to do, can end up having the biggest of results. It was just, I helped him to help himself, and that was it.
No, so I just
It's
had,
all his.
No, no.
And
I'll
then
just-
here he is now being without Mahfouz, there wouldn't be this.
I'll just have-
and you wouldn't be here tonight, and we wouldn't be having such a nice time.
I'll just add a few more things that
that's not
it's it's one sentence. No, it's one sentence. No, it's not. It's not. No, it's one sentence. Yeah, it's one sentence only. So I saw crying these 2 times.
Oh, no.
So one, it was a few days ago about the book, and second time, so again, Richard Reed, my ex-colleague, is witnessed that. So when I became the producer, so she called Lyse. It was the first time, and then she called Lyse and said, Mahfouz now is a journalist, so he's producing news. And she handed over the phone to me, so I saw her crying. So 2 times only.
Okay. Your turn.
I've been told. So your book is a memoir, and you have a fascinating story of going from Australia to Afghanistan. I think your initial idea was to do almond farming. Was it?
We had a
media
Yeah,
environment.
we
Tell us how that happened.
we had a number of investment ideas, but the media is the one that took off. But let's get back to Lyse. So we're our story's not that interesting.
Yeah, come on.
So we
Your story's amazing.
so we come up with this idea to set up this radio station. So we have to look for an office, and in Kabul, the Green Zone, Wazir Akbar Khan. I mean, in 2002, 2003, there was not much violence, but nonetheless, we wanted to have a nice building that was centrally located, had enough rooms. And we didn't know how big this operation would be. Our assumption was it was going to be a very small radio station. So a friend of my father's who had worked with him at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said, "I've got a house. Would you like to rent it?" So we went to the building, and he's very casual. This is the kitchen, and we looked at the kitchen. This is the drawing room, and we're following him around. He goes upstairs. This is one bedroom, the second bedroom, and the third bedroom. The door was closed, and he waited for all of us, and we all gathered there. And he opens the door. He goes, "And this used to be Lyse Doucet's bedroom." There was this build-up, right? And of course, for a while we used to say, "Well, I'll meet you at Lyse's bedroom," which was the news operation.
Didn't you put a studio in there?
And then eventually became a studio. It had, various roles, but it was a very important room, and it helped us a lot, Lyse. And the other story is, I lived in Uzbekistan in the 90s, which I've written about. I'm beginning to sound like Zalmay Khalilzad. Zalmay Khalilzad wrote a book about 15 years ago. You'd ask him about the weather, and he'd say, "As I mentioned in my book, The Envoy," So as I've written about this experience in Uzbekistan, I had a cousin who passed away a few years ago, but he was a conscript during Dr. Najibullah's time.
Oh, stop.
And
Not this story.
he worked at the intelligence agency, and he would accompany the prisoners to court. And one day I'm watching television, and Lyse was in Jerusalem, I think, at the time. And I hear this, this sounds of these footsteps, and my cousin barges in. He gets the seat, puts it right in front of the TV set, sitting on the edge. I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "That's Lyse Doucet." I said, "I know it's who it is." He goes, "She has nice legs." And he said for weeks, while you were covering the Najibullah's trials at the Khat court, he would be there with the prisoners, and he only had eyes for you. So I told Lyse the story in 2002, 2003, and she liked the story. I remember, yeah.
Did you show legs?
She must have.
It was very modern Kabul then.
No, that was Najibullah's time.
Yeah,
it was a
Najibullah's
different time, yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay,
now
back
we're
to your
going
book.
to move
Yes.
on to you.
Yeah,
Yes, and your legs, actually, yes.
So tell us how you started Solo TV.
Well, our business was very much an accidental business, and Lyse has been a witness. Started off with a very small radio station, and we never thought it would be anything but that, a small radio station. We didn't even know how to sustain the business. There was no advertising. And, like a lot of things, it just sort of,
Took off?
It took off. We had a test transmission for a few days, and within a few hours, people all over the city were listening to it. Mahfouz was saying that he used to physically take his song requests to the station, which wasn't far from the BBC.
Oh.
And for a while, because obviously people didn't know how to send emails, there was no connectivity. We used to get, I think, 1,000 or 2,000 letters per every 2 or 3 days. We'd collect the letters. The post office didn't know what to do with it, because for years there was no, people were not sending letters, or they were not at least able to distribute the mail. So it took off, and then of course we followed that with a TV station, and the second and third and fourth TV station. So we had, and of course it just wasn't us. I mean, the entire country
Media was one of the great successes.
One of the great
actually.
journalism.
Yes, and
Mostly Cholo and
Yeah.
Armand. And
no, I mean I think there were a lot of other outlets. There were like 70 or 80 TV stations, and a
Tell
few
us
hundred
a bit
TVs.
about, because some people here will have heard of Afghan Star. Tell us how that came
Well,
about.
Afghan Star is a bit like I don't know if you have the Idol format in this
Yeah,
country.
we do. Pop up.
But it was one of the most exciting things that we've done, and it really sort of was must-watch television.
was it
For a
11
lo-
million people, like a third of the population?
Yes,
watched
people
it, yeah?
people used to, and we basically, I mean, we used to get millions of text messages on a daily basis. It became very serious. People used to lobby for the performers, advertise actually, and cars with like speakers, vote for this guy this week. But it really changed entertainment and music in the country. And one of the interesting things is that, I wrote the book because I thought that's the end. And I thought if I don't write this, people will forget what became of Afghanistan in those 20 years. Do you remember that novel that there's a man who's mentally handicapped, and then he goes on a pill, and his writing improves? I can't remember that. I read it at school. But there was one of those moments that we thought we have this moment in Afghanistan that was transformative. And it's going to go away. And in 10 years or 20 years, no one's going to remember the progress and the changes we saw in the country. And I thought, I have to write this. And I didn't even know that the TV station or the radio stations would survive. It was sort of cathartic to write this book.
A lot of people here will probably be surprised that you are still broadcasting.
Well, I mean,
And
4
could you
years
talk
on,
about how
yeah,
it
four
is
years on, not only the country hasn't gone back, in a lot of ways, it's become like a, if you the parallels are to Iran, right? So people are almost in defiance are doing things that they probably didn't even do in 2019, 2020. People go to restaurants, people go out in the major cities, of course, and people can still consume music. People still consume entertainment programs. There are various ways of getting content from the outside, satellite, internet, and so forth. And so we're still there. We still employ hundreds of people, and
Including women.
including women. We have more women working for our news operation than before 2021. But I've got to be careful because people sometimes say, well, you're being too optimistic. In a lot of ways, the Taliban are attempting to change Afghanistan, but the new Afghanistan is also changing the Taliban, especially in the major cities. And you're seeing that in the way that they conduct themselves. There is, I'm not saying there's freedom, but relative to what we expected, it could be far worse. Let's put it this way.
I mean, as you say that, I remember sitting on this platform like 4 years ago, just after the Taliban had taken over, and having these discussions where some people said the Taliban have changed. This is Taliban 2.0. And I insisted at the time, I don't know if the Taliban has changed, but Afghanistan has changed, and therefore the Taliban will not be able to act as they did last time. But I was wrong. They have done pretty much exactly, haven't they, what they did before? Then every week seems to bring new restrictions. So.
But it's about the people, right? Education is probably one of the few areas that obviously we've had to go back, although there are, I'd rather not say this because it's being streamed, but let's put it this way, a lot of people are able to get an education in proper schools. We have a lot of education programs on television that reach like 5 or 6 million people on a daily basis. But people are hungry for education, including family members of the Taliban. And one of the interesting things was we've lost count. I think we went up to like 2,000 or 3,000 different programs on education since the ban in 2022. And the people who are most opposed, that we can amplify, are people who are either members of the regime or sympathizers, because we can get away with it. So a cleric who's the chief, mullah for the GDI, the intelligence agency, comes out and says, women have to get an education, girls have to get an education. And I think that change has to come from within. We made some mistakes, I think, in terms of the education. And I remember having this discussion with Karzai. Every time they'd open a girls' school, there'd be some person from the Danish embassy, from the Swedish embassy, from the Norwegian embassy. And it became, girls' education became a Western endeavor. And I think for the Taliban, it became a sort, this is exactly what the West is trying to do. There must be an agenda. And I think we failed to embrace this as a very Afghan thing, I think. I don't feel hopeless. I feel relatively hopeful about the future. And I'm sorry you cannot go back. We do need people like you to go back. And I know both of you are well liked, including by the Taliban, but they're scared and they're paranoid.
Mahfouz, you've just come from there. I mean, are you optimistic? How do you tell us what the situation is like at the moment?
As I said earlier, that Afghans, which Sajid said that he might not agree with some of what I'm going to say, is that these people have lived decades of war, poverty, so they have seen every worst thing in their life. But I mean, education, as Saad said, there are education, but not the way that people are want. It's not there. Like girls
do you
can't.
have daughters?
Yeah, I do have. Yeah, I mean, luckily I have a 8-year-old daughter, and I have about 11, 12 nieces in Kabul. So I was telling these the other day, today actually. So they think that I'm in the UK, so I am the king or the prime minister of here. They are telling my daughter to tell me or Lyse to bring them all here to do education in here. I mean, girls above age 12, they can't go to school.
Yeah.
So the midwife was, you mentioned about earthquake, right? So, so the country needs, women to be educated, which is, I mean, we went to Badakhshan. We did a story about, maternity's death. The mothers are dying because of the lack of doctors, midwives. And people are, really suffering from this part. Security is there. This is what Afghans always want. They're saying, if we can find a piece of bread to eat with a tea, which is very famous. Afghans, poor people, they're always having tea with bread. But security, there is a security. There's no doubt about that. But education. Is particularly for women is really affected. I mean, that took us hundreds back.
I mean, personally, I think we should all feel shame that in 2025 there is a country in the world where girls cannot go to high school or women go to university. And yes, some might be getting online education, but it's a small percentage. It's and it worries me, and I'd like to hear what you all think about that. It's now more than 4 years, and it feels a bit like the world has moved on, that nobody is really talking about this. And you're even seeing people, well, Russia has recognized the Taliban, but other countries almost a sort of de facto recognition, inviting Taliban to conferences. European countries now dealing with the Taliban because they want there to be able to send refugees back. Because we had Nigel Farage here saying if he becomes prime minister, he'll pay the Taliban to take Afghans back.
This current government is working on a plan to send people back.
Get a mic, so.
Yeah.
That bossy Clay Clark.
This government is working on a plan to repatriate Afghan refugees, as are the Germans, Norwegians, Austrians, Italians, and Trump White House. I think Stephen Miller's got a plan to send back 10 to 15,000 Afghans, as well as Ukrainians, as well as Venezuelans. So they say, well, it's not our problem. These people need to go back. I mean, it's for many of these political parties, it's an existential threat to have refugees streaming in, and the ones who don't qualify. The Germans have had two batches of criminals they've sent back, but there are many more.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that is true.
And do you feel concerned that there isn't attention on Afghanistan now?
Well, I mean, we're resigned to the fact that no one cares anymore. And I think...
We care.
Well, you do. Yes, thank you. But, we've had, since 2023, we've had 4 million Afghans who've been sent back from Iran and Pakistan. And we expect another 1.5 million to 2 million.
Number.
The 4 million people absorbed. And the interesting thing is that a lot of help is coming from within Afghanistan, from the business community. And one of the reasons the Afghan currency is one of the strongest in the region because of remittances. So all the people that left after 2021 are sending money back. It's sort of helping, and there's sort of some development. But in a lot of ways, we're on our own. The Russians are not doing anything. The Chinese are not doing anything. The Iranians are definitely not doing anything. And the Americans have reduced their funding from about 700-800 million to zero.
Yeah.
So yes, we're on the verge of every crisis you could possibly imagine.
And some of you were following the news today at Checkers as President Trump suddenly announces breaking news. I want Bagram Airport back, that Biden should never have withdrawn without taking over Bagram Airport. It's only an hour's flight away from China. And you were saying, Saad, that it could possibly... I mean, it's like the generals of Myanmar, that President Trump imposed swinging tariffs on them, but they didn't care because they were so pleased to get a letter from the President of the United States of America. It's sort of, wow, he's writing to us, he knows we're here. But there might be a bit of that for the Taliban, that they think, oh, he's going to pay attention to us.
Yeah, I mean, why would Afghanistan, beyond the sort of the moral obligation, would be important to the Americans? CT, counterterrorism. So Bagram fits into something in relation to CT. Potentially they could give a portion of the base with Taliban supervision. I think that's been considered, and some of my sources say that they may be open to that, as long as they get a whole bunch of other things. But certainly the Trump administration does not care about women's rights and women's education and human rights. It's a different world. I mean, we're not the only victims, So are you in Canada,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Please care about Canada, too.
Yes.
Can I just ask you, because you were the one who's been writing a lot of books about Afghanistan. I mean, you chose a long time ago to move away from just straight reporting and to try to tell broader stories. Did you find that you could engage people more directly that way?
I mean, to be honest, I always wanted to write books rather than being a journalist, so I kind of did journalism to try and earn money to be able to write books in the first place. But then I found that the stories, and I wanted to write novels, to be honest, but I found that the stories, and I started with Afghanistan, which is famous for its storytelling, that the stories I was hearing from people were better than anything I could make up. So I've been telling other people's stories ever since, and I feel like it's a privilege to do that. But your book's really a love letter to Afghanistan. I think I tried to do that with Sewing Circles, which came out in 2002, which was a very different time because that was after the Taliban had gone, the first iteration of the Taliban, and so it was a much more hopeful time. And I think one of the saddest things I've ever heard was going to Kabul just 2 weeks after the Taliban took over in 2021. And one of my young female friends there saying to me that you created dreams and shattered them, and it would have been better if you, the West, had never come. And I just wondered how you feel, Mahfouz, about that. Do you feel that it would have been better if the West had never got involved with Afghanistan, or was there some positive?
Well, both. But starting with positive was that that some Afghans got the opportunity to come abroad and do higher educations and know the world. So that's one thing that the Taliban, who are afraid of the Afghans now inside Afghanistan, is because of it has now more educated people than it was before. So I mean, in 90s, so no one could have criticized Taliban, but now on the TV, Tolo, everywhere they sit and telling them in front of them, saying, this is what you're doing wrong. But that's, good about it. But they left. I mean, what people are, I think, saying. So they came, the Western Americans, they just came there for their own benefits. They have got what they want to, and then they left. So trusting Western, they're saying, every Afghan. So they're not trustee. You can't trust them anymore. Because they always saying about human rights. Look what's happening in Afghanistan. That no one is coming and questioning the Taliban. Saying why you're doing this, why you're not doing this, right? But so people really get upset with the Westerns, and particularly with the Americans. So they came and they have done their jobs and they left us.
Mahfouz, I have an idea. We rename the Intercontinental Trump Tower. That could work.
That's really very good epilogue for
You can write that book. Yes, yes. Yeah.
How do you feel, Lyse, about that, having been there?
Of Trump Tower?
No, not about that. It's about
having written the book about the
20
hotel.
Years,
What's that?
About those 20 years you were reporting a lot.
I get asked a lot, as we all get asked, and now we're asking tonight. And I don't look at it in the same way. It is true that many feel that the West betrayed Afghanistan. I think mistakes were made by both sides, by Afghans and non-Afghans. And I always remember there was a dinner party one night at Ali Mauji's place, who used to represent the Aga Khan, and they asked around the dinner table were heads of the major aid agencies in Kabul, and there were some diplomats, and they allowed me to come and listen to their discussions. And it was 10 years into the intervention, and they wanted to things were starting to go wrong. The Taliban were coming back, so many stories of corruption. And they wanted to discuss why things hadn't been turning out right, and they went round the table. And after about an hour, they came to this conclusion, and they announced it, and they said, we should have listened to Afghans. And I was sitting there, and I was stunned. A conclusion which sounds really simple, but in fact it is very complex. But I said out loud, is that it? That you didn't listen to Afghans? And that was the story, that so many aid agencies came, and I was shocked, even Canadian, and even us humble Canadians, even Canadian aid, who told Afghans that they knew better than Afghans. Well, you need this school. Well, we don't actually need a school, we need a pump. Yeah, you need this school, and as Saad says, and we're going to put a plaque on it saying this is from the Danish development, or the Norwegian, or the Canadian. Admittedly, it was difficult sometimes to find out which Afghans to work with, because Afghans did exploit the foreigners coming. There was a lot of money. There was too much money. But I think it's now understood that these large-scale military-backed interventions don't work. And if they are to work, that it has to be a true cooperation, that we can't assume we know what is best, that we know more than the people we say that we're going to support. But the other point I would add is that I really don't think that 2 decades of international engagement were for nothing. Notwithstanding the mistakes that were made, and in some ways the major reversal, that the international engagement, as Mahfouz hinted,
Your thing's not working.
create.
Someone's.
There you go. It works now.
Created a space that created the most educated, the most connected Afghan generation in history, and that a whole generation dared to dream bigger than ever before. And even though it's true that they dreamed big only to find those dreams shattered, But it is those big dreams that is firing up those girls who are still there, still trying to get an education, trying to have an online education, some of them even taking to the streets. But they know that something better is out there. They know there is something to fight for. They know that these are their rights. And so that's what I always say, that it helped Afghans to create a different sense of themselves and their relationship with the wider world. There was a Talib leader, one of the founding members of the Taliban, who wrote a book, Mullah Zaif. And I remember one line in his book where he said, the first time that we ruled, we didn't have the education to make a deal with the world. And I thought this line was so interesting. In other words, we didn't understand the ways of the international community. We didn't understand about women's rights. We didn't understand about how to develop our country. And Mullah Zaif then told me during the talks in 222, he says, we're going to be different this time. And in fact, the last time I saw him, he was one of the people who said to me that 95% of the Taliban don't agree with the harshest of these edicts, to which many people criticized online and said, well, if you are 95%, why aren't you doing something about it? But it is that idea about coming of age, a different sense of self, still rooted in Afghan culture and sense of self, but an understanding about how to work within a wider community.
Having said that, do you remember, so we were both in the same hotel after the Taliban took over, the Serena Hotel, which I now believe is it called the Hotel Grand
Hotel, Grand Hotel.
Yeah, so we were in this hotel, which had twice been attacked by the Taliban, and suddenly the Taliban were running the security in the hotel, and in fact the guy in charge of security had been in charge of the suicide bombers brigade, and which I found quite disconcerting, and they would come to breakfast with all their kind of Kalashnikovs, like helping themselves to scrambled egg and things at the buffet, and one day, and I actually got to know him quite well, I even went to his village, and he said to me, you people should be relieved that we're in charge of security, because we spent years trying to attack this hotel, so we know where all the weak points are. But what I was going to say is, do you remember, so there was only a few of us staying, and funnily, I mean, it's a weird thing about Afghanistan, it's used to be female Western reporters who particularly get very passionate about it. And so there was a small group of us, mostly women, journalists in the Hotel Western, and really no one else than the Taliban. And so we were covering ourselves totally when we went outside, but we sort of decided in the evening in the buffet to stop covering our heads, because it was just us. Like, why did we need to cover our heads? One day the hotel manager called us and was kind of embarrassed. Lindsay Hilton was there, and had said that the Taliban commander had said to him that we must all cover ourselves up, because he said we didn't fight this war for 20 years so women could wander around with their heads uncovered. And I mean, I thought that was actually quite telling, because this was right at the beginning, and that showed that was that kind of mindset of thinking women should not have any choices. And so, yeah. I think we should open up for questions.
But I should say it is interesting, because where's Carlotta? Carlotta's here too, Carlotta Gall. We all happened to find ourselves in Ukraine. And one night having dinner around a table, there was you, there was me, there was Carlotta, there was Paula Bronstein, there was a whole number of women in the thick of the war in Ukraine, and we all met around this table in this restaurant in Kyiv, and we just talked about Afghanistan. Because poor Afghans, there is this disease called Afghanitis. There's no cure, and nobody's looking for the cure, and they're stuck with us, whether they like it or not.
Right. I'm sure you've all got lots of questions. I recognise a number of people here I hope's going to ask questions. I think that, have you got a roving mic? Yeah. Lady at the back there.
Hi, thank you so much. That was so heartwarming and also just, so beautiful. My question is maybe a bit Gen Z of me, but there's this trend on social media that I've seen, which is called the Taliban Bros. And it's basically these influencers, mainly male influencers, who are going to Afghanistan and making content and making a lot of money from going there. And I'm interested as to whether you think this is a damaging thing, and are we going to see a surge in tourism in Afghanistan, and how do you feel about that?
That's a good question. And it's not just men, there is female.
Western and Chinese influencers who go there. Well, I mean, if someone goes to the U.S. today and does stories on restaurants in Trump's America, would you admonish what they're doing? So we may not agree with the government, but I think in a lot of ways people are getting to know Afghanistan, a different side of Afghanistan. I don't see the harm because they're not usually political. They talk about food and things. I mean,
some of
the
are saying that this is not as black and white as people were saying outside, and that women are actually able to do a lot of things. So
I mean, women. I mean, Mahfouza's probably got a better idea, but I mean, my mom. We have other female relatives. They go to restaurants. Women. We have female employees who drive. Again, this is in the major cities. I want to be very careful.
And your women on screen, what do they wear?
They wear surgical masks
Okay.
because it's been decreed they have to cover their faces. So, but these influencers, I know that Piers Morgan had some of these people on and was lecturing them that they're sort of whitewashing what the Taliban are doing. I think that's a little unfair because they're not political commentators. They're not there to say that a couple of them maybe, but generally it's about food. The best ice cream in the world, the best kebab in the world, the best this in the world, and it's not just Americans. It's a lot of Iranian influencers are in the country, a lot of Chinese influencers are in the country. I'm not as perturbed by it as much as some others are.
As much as Christina and Lyse. I think the food Afghan food is great, as Mahfouz mentioned, mantu and ashak, the best in the world. But there are influencers who go and make these broad statements. Afghanistan has such a bad reputation. Come here, it's so great, it's so safe, and things are so great. And then sometimes, it is safe, but they sometimes make an allusion to things are not so great for women, but they are concluding what life is like in Afghanistan. They're not just talking about the food or the little details. They
Taliban
slide over.
Repost these for some reason.
You tell them, yes.
Promoting the friendliness of the Taliban fighters, which because they allow them to film them. So it's a bit of a promotion for me as an Afghan. So I'm very scared of going there. So
Yes.
No, but as Saad said, I know a couple of women, businesswomen. They're actually doing quite well, and Taliban Ministry of Business, and they do supporting them. Like a restaurant. There's a big restaurant now in Kabul, woman restaurant, which has never been like that. Yeah, she is happily and some other kind of businesses which we had a program at the BBC for one day in Afghanistan about women. So we have talked with a lot of women, businesswomen. So they are, as it's 50-50. Like for some women, like students, teachers, it's hard, but there are some opportunities for women. But I can say the Taliban's are better than 90s in terms of women, restrictions that now women are, I've seen, in Kabul, not just in Kabul, in Badakhshan and Herat. So you see a woman walk with a man, side by side, not a problem, which during the 90s, you're not allowed. They were not allowed. And in market, in this, near the Blue Mosque, Polkishti. So you see hundreds of women, men, just like we filmed it. I have the proof of it, and
but mostly men. Yeah.
No, it's men and women mixed. So I've seen it. As Saad was saying, in big cities, and even we went to Baharak, one of the districts of in Badakhshan. Sharana, another district, which is 4 hours drive. We were sitting with women, interviewing them. So there was, we saw the Taliban's walking. They didn't. I mean, it depends which part of the country we are talking about. So when it comes
So,
to,
Mahfouz, I think it
Give me a
depends
microphone.
what-
Take a microphone.
It depends what topic do you cover
no,
when you're, because I've seen the reporting recently. It's usually about similar topics, about how Afghans are suffering without aid, how Afghans are suffering from malnutrition, some private schools or some kind of underground school. It's kind of similar narrative. And for me as an Afghan, I miss Afghan Star so much. This was something I used to watch here with my family because we haven't been living in Afghanistan for so long. Those things are dead for me. I don't have Afghan Star anymore in my evening to get together with my family and watch and celebrate the young Afghan women and men singing, dancing. I miss the culture. I miss my music that was lively. So those are the things. And the narrative of media, I think, is a bit similar
yeah.
to what the Taliban allows. I don't know how free you felt when you went there to report on, like I haven't seen any young woman speaking even to the BBC journalist who would say openly, I want to go to school. They have to hide, they have to change names. This is not freedom.
No, that's, I totally agree.
Yeah.
In that sense, that as Saad said, that their presenters are, I mean, covering your face and reading news is hard.
Yeah, Tulu is
It's
there,
not-
but it's not the same.
it's-
I want it the same way.
Yeah, it's not the Afghanistan that we before 2021, but it's not like the way that also people are saying that it's everything is shut. That's not also true, right? So I'm going to Afghanistan now and then. So I mean, my argument is that it's not the Taliban. Yes, there are a lot of restrictions on the woman, but they have changed a little bit at least. You see, woman restaurant, as I said, the biggest restaurant we ever have in Kabul. So now that woman is posting her pictures. If you say Kabul restaurant Zan in Kabul, you see how big is that?
Yeah. But
There's some changes.
I don't want to make it into a discussion
Yeah.
between me and you guys.
Okay,
Just
there's
one-
another.
yeah, one
Let's,
more.
because we haven't got much time. Let's move on to. You can carry on afterwards. This gentleman over.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. One observation and one question, if I may. So one of the things I do is teach law at a university, and I'm privileged to be able to teach students from Afghanistan, including those of Tajik heritage who've come over recently. And certainly, if there is a message to the Taliban, it's missing out if it's driven out these very talented people, because I have the privilege of teaching them, and they will be active in the British economy. So that's good for us, but not so good for Afghanistan. And then the other question is, hypothetically, if there were a free vote tomorrow in Afghanistan, who would be elected?
It's a good question. Very good question.
Probably none of the above,
Yeah.
because I think the previous regime has been discredited in a huge way. The Ghani administration. I think there's someone like Karzai, people are reminiscing about his days, and he stayed in the country. I think he'd do okay. But I think we have a new generation of Afghans who've emerged. The country's population is 40 million. It's growing at 3% per annum. It's doubled in size since 2001, and the median age is still 18. So every 5-10 years, a new generation of Afghans emerge. Things move really, really quickly in that country. Will the Taliban prevail? It depends who's running against them, I think. Because in a lot of ways, what we discovered was that how conservative the country is and was. People talk about Kandahar, girls can't walk down the street. They couldn't walk down the street in 2019. So that level of conservatism, this whole idea about Afghanistan in the 70s, my mother worked for the BBC in London in 1966 when I was born. There were very few Afghans who were educated. Literacy rate in 1978 was 8%. So this whole idea of this, this wonderful country in the 70s is a myth. 20 years has been transformative for the country. And, and as Afghans, we're very thankful that the world paid attention for as long as it did. Many people lost their lives fighting the war. Billions of dollars was spent. Some of it filtered down to the people of Afghanistan. It was transformative, and some of those changes are permanent. So I think I wanted to just add to what Lyse said before, that we're very thankful, and we have ourselves to blame. I think it's important to look within. I think we made a lot of mistakes as Afghans. We lost a lot of opportunities.
I can see Michael's sample over there.
Oh.
Lyse, thanks for having me and all of us here tonight. And I would just say I stand in awe at how, after all you've been through and witnessed, that you remain such a good and open person who brings out the good in the people around you, and that it's utterly amazing in an era of cynicism that you've come through as Lyse. And obviously I've been.
I send the same compliment back to you, tied with a lovely bow.
No. But I think I wanted to ask you, do you sense a dilemma between sort of Lyse as the optimist and the person who sees the good in people and brings the good out in people? And some of that I think is reflected in the discussion we've just had now. Despite all the stuff which has happened in Afghanistan, you just talked about, yes, it wasn't all for nothing, the 20 years, and today. So do you feel tortured in the dilemma between the sort of like almost like the bearer of bad truths and the seeker of good truths? I'd say if you'd ask me as an analyst, the situation in Afghanistan and the Taliban, I obviously appreciate the good things we all hear, but the Taliban have by force imposed a quasi-Islamic, a supposedly Islamic authoritarian regime, and they're, every bad thing in the book they are engaged in, and they're also subtle enough to know how to put a good front on some of it. As an analyst, but then as the sort of the wanting to be the bearer of good news and also to offer some hope, we tend, do you feel that as a dilemma that sometimes the need to bring out both the nuance and the optimism that sometimes it dilute the bad news that sometimes that perhaps you have to bear, and how do you deal with that dilemma in your storytelling?
Another good question.
Thank you, Michael. It's really good to have you here, and I think you're also emblematic of those who, against all the odds, kept looking for hope and for something to come through in Afghanistan, because of course you worked with Afghans and still work with Afghans. There's a lot of people here tonight who are still in connection with Afghans, still trying to build on what there is there. And I think your question is, I think it would be a question to you too, Christine, and also Saad, in the sense of that, people sometimes say, "Oh, Lyse, you're a war correspondent." I said, no. I mean, some colleagues call themselves a war correspondent, and very, very proud of it, and I completely respect that. And I never have, because it's a terrible comment to say that the main stories are only about war, and that even in the worst of places, that there is some light. Things are going on, and I think, Christina, too, you too try to find better stories where it is difficult, where there is the dilemma, as you said. I remember one time after the murder of Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia, a guy from a leading person from Saudi Arabia said to me, "Lyse, do you know there's pink taxis for women now in Saudi?" And I looked at him and I said, "It's a good story about pink taxis for women, but right now, when people are worried about the murder of a leading journalist in Saudi Arabia, it's not the time to write about pink taxis." So you don't want to be accused of whitewashing something, but I do think it's incumbent upon journalists to show the whole picture, to show that, and this is part of what I've tried to accomplish in the book, that in the darkest of times, people have to find ways to carry on. And Afghans did used to say that the last thing to hope to die was hope. And I remember our colleague Bilal Sarwawi telling me a few years ago, saying, Lyse, even hope has died. But they do. They're very tenacious. And in the same way, Saad, that you set up Afghan Star, you set up the comedy program. What was it called? The laughter. The one about what was the word in the? Yeah. Because see, you missed that one too. Is it's Afghan sense of humor is also legendary. So I think don't you think, Michael, there's a human need? I mean, everyone here, I think we all want some kind of, we want to believe that all is not lost, that there's something good in all the bad. And I think from my years, and we've been doing this for about the same length of time, is that even though we would never want the bad to happen, there are times when good can and does come out of the bad. I think it's just a human impulse.
It does seem a particularly bad time at the moment.
Yes, it does. But I think it's possible. Would you say, Saad, it's the most difficult time, darkest? I'm not saying a lot.
Well, there's an Afghan saying that someone goes to a camel and says, your back is crooked. And the camel responds, which bit of me is not crooked, right? Afghanistan's had problems, whether it's about drugs or violence, thuggery, predatory behavior. We've had these problems for decades. So we look at things in terms of the glass half full. I do, at least. And maybe I'm naive in my optimism. And you're not wrong in some of the things you've said. But it's, to paraphrase, quote John McCain, it's always darkest before it gets even darker. I hope that's not true.
Yes. But I hope we all grasp onto these mantras. I always used to quote Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist, about optimism of the will and pessimism of the intellect. But one of the best expressions, since you're a great Irishman, the Irish say, the situation. Oh, there's Anna Williams. The situation is hopeless, but not serious.
Okay.
Is that right? Is that what they say?
Maybe that's a good place to end. I'd really like to. I mean, we could go on all night, but hopefully we can. Oh, okay. Let's just have Carlotta.
Carlotta.
Yeah, one more question.
Another Afghan.
Yeah, a very brief question, and you could all answer it in one sentence. But should the West engage with the Taliban, or should they be tough with sanctions and all that brings for the people? Thank you.
Okay, Saad.
Let's see a show of hands. How many people think the West should engage with the Taliban? And how many people say they should shut them out, sanction them, isolate them? Oh, all the.
I mean,
no wonder the microphones are not working tonight.
Isn't it about
conspiring to silence us?
Isn't it about how you engage? I'm not sure that it's quite as black and white as that.
Yes. What's your?
I think they have to engage not because of the Taliban. You have to engage because of the people of Afghanistan. How to sustain those gains. How to remain connected to the very people you helped for 2 decades. Don't abandon the people of Afghanistan because of the Taliban. I think it's important to engage for that reason.
What do you think, Christine?
Yeah, I mean, I feel at the beginning that there were some people that thought we should just cut everything off, and that is to punish the very people that you were trying to help in the first place, who've done nothing wrong. They've just now have find themselves under this terrible regime. I think we do have to engage on some level, but I think you have to be very careful. I mean, the idea of inviting Taliban to speak at international conferences and things like that, I think, is appalling. And I also think any time any foreign delegation goes and speaks to the Taliban, they absolutely have to have a woman there, because otherwise you're just playing into what they're doing. So there are ways of engaging, but I certainly don't think that we should be recognizing or rewarding, but I do think we should be aiding people who are in a terrible situation and have done nothing wrong.
Well, I would say agree with Saad. I mean, whether we like the Taliban or not, we know they are not good, but because of the 40 million people who are living there and suffering, so I think we have a saying that, how do you say that, if you pull the rope, you put yourself in. So I mean, who is really affecting? Who is giving the price? Is the ordinary people of Afghanistan? If that woman that that needs medicine, education, that pregnant woman, the girl. So because of those 40 million people, so I think it is important to engage with them and to talk to them. That's all.
Yes. I also believe, I think, mediators would say that the process of mediation, through the process of engagement, you can try to change people. There's that expression about killing with kindness, that you try to change, as Christina said, things like putting women in the delegation. There are countries, especially Pakistan, they always send women ministers over to meet the Taliban, to make the point as loudly as possible that women should hold positions of responsibility. And even more, they're really good at it. So by showing by example, but I think we are all, and it seems the view here tonight is that we can't abandon the people of Afghanistan, and we can only hope, because at the
moment isn't working because they're just coming up with more restrictions. So it's not. So
I mean, Afghan is a place where miracles seem to happen. I mean, when the Mujahideen defeated the Soviet Empire, I mean, in a way, seemed to defy the forces of history. The fact that the Taliban defeated the world's biggest military alliance and came back, you think, wow, how did that happen? And so, I suppose in a God-fearing country, maybe we do have to look at miracles to say that something will happen. But I don't think we should give up on Afghan history, because if there's any thread, it is that nothing lasts forever in Afghanistan. Except the good things.
And except for the Intercontinental
Yes,
Hotel.
yes.
So on that note, I'd like to thank, please, you're going to be signing books downstairs. Please buy the book, it's wonderful.
Yes. And there's free cupcakes. If you can't afford, you can have your cake and read it too. You can have a cupcake with the cover of the book on the...
That reminds us of Boris, don't say that.
Huh?
That reminds us of Boris.
What's that?
Having your cake and eating it.
No, reading it too.
Oh, reading it, okay. So, thank you very much. We should have got someone to take
That was really fun. It was really fun.
I wonder if someone took a picture of us. We had a picture. Maybe somewhere.
With the general public, so I don't know a lot, but I love